The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on how to do a quote and enroll, the ACA process. We've got a couple great guests with us, which I'll introduce in a little bit. My name is David Goldberg, Agency Director for MyLourie Life and Health. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar should not take too long, and this is an open forum. If you look at your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little section on the right-hand side that says questions. Feel free to ask questions throughout, and then we will try and answer those by the end of the presentation. As we know, the ACA season is just days away, and in order to properly quote and enroll, you want to have a great platform. And with that in mind, we've got the head developer of that platform with us. His name is Trip Hill. Trip, welcome, and thank you for working with us on today's webinar. So I'm going to turn it over to Trip. He's going to do a couple enrollment simulations so you can actually see what it's like to do a quote and enrollment from beginning to end. With that in mind, welcome, Trip, and thank you. I'll let you take it away.
Thanks for the intro, David. Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to show off some of the new features of MyLourie this morning. We've got some updates to make it a lot easier to do the quote and enroll process for ACA and kind of streamlined the whole flows a little bit easier for everybody to use. So to start off, we can go to our quote and enroll area. And one of the new features we added is this add new client process. I'll take you through the process here of adding a new client without having to enter in their information twice. So all you have to do is click add a new client, select the product ACA, and then here you'll see that we can begin the enrollment and we will create a client when we return from the marketplace automatically. So we'll start that process. And new for this year, CMS has brought requirements for consent. So similar to scope of appointment on Medicare, there's requirements around scope consent from clients to be able to work with them on the marketplace. We have the ability to send the client an email requesting their consent. And I'm sharing just my browser so you can't see it, but it pops open an email client to send an email with just boilerplate text asking them to give their consent to access your information in the marketplace. And if you have the connect feature, it also gives you the option to send it via text message. Very simple text message asking for their consent, and you just retain that in your records so that if anything happens, you can provide that upon request. So we'll say that we have our consent on file ready for this client. You only need to get consent once until it is revoked. So you can just proceed. You'll log in to the marketplace using your FFM ID and password. You'll go through the typical healthcare.gov searching for an application that may or may not exist, whether it's a new client or not. If it's a new client, they may not already have an application. So we'll call this Joe Greenville. He was born in 1990. We've gotten his permission. We'll search for him. We don't have him, so he must be new on the marketplace as well. We'll add a new application for him. I'm sure you all are very familiar with this whole process, so I'll mention it as I go, but we'll do a simple two-person husband-wife household.
So Trip, I'm going to just interject here for 2 seconds. So this is actually the healthcare.gov application. So what people are saying is healthcare.gov. In the past, we've done some webinars showing MyLourie, but this is what you are seeing here is healthcare.gov live. And so, by the way, this webinar is recorded for those who wish to go back and see the process. A lot of newer agents that haven't seen a healthcare.gov application itself. So thank you.
Yep, and this is healthcare.gov's testing environment, which we can't really provide access to outside of ourselves on the development team, but they it lets us replicate an exact workflow of what will happen starting here in a few days.
That's a great agent, by the way, Trip. That was a great agent.
The top agent.
The top.
Not just any agent. All right, so we got our two members, our two applicants. We'll go through relationships and household. So obviously in a live environment, you have to enter in social security numbers to make sure your applications get processed, but in a test environment, we don't enter socials. We'll leave that. We'll say they both have coverage for the current plan year from the marketplace. Not too relevant. Then we'll go through HRAs, QSARAs. Seems like it gets longer every year.
That it does. They add a couple slides. It seems like every couple months.
All right, we're almost at the end here in the marketplace. And we'll take our eligibility PDF and see they're eligible, they get a subsidy.
So
we'll head back to MyLourie.
For those people who have been doing this for quite some time and know the process, have been using MyLourie or what's called a double redirect system, this process has not changed really that much, but there is one key piece, and we'll mention that. I know you went over it earlier, Trip, about the consent to acknowledgement, for looking up that client's information on healthcare.gov, right?
Yes.
But
before you head into healthcare.gov.
Correct. Right. And you said that is basically almost open-ended as long as they, until they revoke it, it essentially gives you permission to access their information using MyLourie. You wouldn't want to go in that client's folder. We'll talk a separate webinar about data mismatches and how to report a life change and updating some things. But what you see right here is the actual enrollment piece. And Brenda, that was a good question. As far as documentation goes, we're going to go over that and just after Trip kind of wraps up. And that's a very good question because that's a big piece. I saw that pop up too. But I don't want to interrupt Trip too much. So thanks, Trip. Keep going, and we'll come back to that, Brenda.
Yeah, it's all important. So this is the landing page when you come back from healthcare.gov when you're doing the create a new client flow. So here you'll see we have a primary and spouse in this situation. So it created these client profiles for us. And if you had dependents, you'd have a tab for each dependent as well. So you can review the information here. You can't edit it, but this is all just pulled straight from the marketplace application you provided. So then we'll continue with our enrollment, which will then load in our eligibility data and continue the process. So we got no policies. We have our APTC. This is just the review for the eligibility data. And here we'll attest their tobacco status. They're both non-tobacco users. And the effective date here, which is also new, if there's multiple effective dates available, say they're eligible for a special enrollment period as well as their open enrollment period, you could select that to pick which plan year you're doing, which effective date you'd want to have, and that's all based on what eligibility data tells us is available for that applicant.
So, Trip, I've got a question here. All right, so that is new, the tobacco status. The page before just confirms basically everything that the marketplace is kicking back after you've done the quote, you've quoted it. I mean, it comes back from the marketplace, and now it's repopulating that information into MyLourie. You come to this page. This is where you can choose if a client wants to apply all of the tax credit they're eligible for or less than all of the tax credit they're eligible for. Sometimes people may want to apply for less, but most of the time they're going to use all of it. So this is where you would adjust it. And then, yeah, you've got that taxpayer attestation. I like the fact that you can choose multiple effective dates. So, Trip, I've got a question for you then. When you're quoting somebody and you choose an effective date in the quote, does that have to match up to this effective date here?
So yes, but this process, actually, we haven't run a quote yet. So as soon as we attest here and select our effective date, that's when the quote's going to be run. So it's going to be run for a 1/1/2022 effective date automatically.
I got you. Okay, thanks.
So that is always something to be concerned with. You never want to run a quote for a 12/1/2021 plan, but try and enroll a 1/1/2022 or something like that.
Perfect. All right.
All right, we'll continue. So here we have our quotes that are available for this family, and their CSR and their APTC has been applied. We can filter down the plans based on a number of criteria. Since they qualify for a CSR, it's good to break it down to just silver plans, right? And maybe you're more interested in a Blue Cross plan. And then you can, filter by MOOP or deductible or premium as well if you need to. We can then compare a few plans. Oh, they're all kind of Blue Crosses, so it might not be that much of a comparison here.
Well, hold on. Yeah, okay, so you're doing a comparison. That's great. Yeah, I was going to talk about the more info. So if you're doing a plan comparison, I didn't want to skip over it too quick. It has everything right there at your fingertips, your top, as far as your deductible, your copays, etc. But then if you scroll down a little bit further, you've got the design of the plan, that's the blue and white checkered kind of summary of benefits, essentially. You've got some great information on there. So if you need to get that over to a client, it's right there at your fingertips. So, I'm sorry, Trip, keep going.
Nope, that's great. And the more info and the comparison, if you're comparing plans, they're basically the same thing. It's just more info for a single plan. But you get all the same info. So if you wanted to compare multiple plans, you can do that and get all of the same benefits, get the links to brochures and directories and such.
That is great. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and pick this Blue Exclusive Reedy Silver 2. So we can see our premium credit is going to be $183 on this net, and we have our 2 applicants. Our locations, we've confirmed all that looks good. So on here, we'll go through the electronic APTC agreement and enrollment agreement and agree to that. We'll sign for Joe, and we can see the effective date, the plan name, and the net premium here as well, just for confirmation, and we can submit our enrollment.
So the net premium is now showing on there. That's a change, and the actual plan name too. That's a change from 2021. A good change too. So
it's when you're doing as many applications as some agents do, you may want to make sure that you're in the right place with the right plan for the right client.
100%, 100% agree. All right, so that is the process for what was that? A new client, right? Add a new client.
Yep.
Okay. So fairly straightforward. This is your receipt here. Yeah. And I always recommend sending, saving. This is on file in your MyLourie profile, but sometimes a client may want a copy of it via PDF, and you can send that to them, just the confirmation and everything. It's great. Thanks, Trip.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So then for an existing client, oops, sorry, go on, David.
No, that's exactly what I was about to say. You got it. Keep going.
So an existing client, it's literally the same workflow, except for you pick your client first, and then you click on ACA Health. From there, you'll click begin enrollment, go into the marketplace, and come back, and the process is exactly the same, except for you don't see the review your new client information because we didn't create a client for you. So if you want, I can run through that, or we can just
once if you've got an existing client on there, there's no real change there. The only thing I tell people is make sure that client's information is up to date. Every year when you are talking with your clients to redetermine their eligibility for the following year, Brenda, I'm about to get your other question here too. You always want to make sure that their income is still the same, their household size hasn't changed, and their zip code, they're still living in the same place, because all of that could determine A, what plans they're eligible for, and then B, what their tax credit, could be. And so you want to have as much accurate information as possible to avoid a nice surprise when they go to file their taxes the following year. So the workflow is the same as far as that goes. Trip, you saying you just find your existing client and just click on, when you're quoting and enroll, you just find your client and then click on ACA and go from there. Right. That's great. That is great. Thanks, Trip.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up zip code and county. Making sure the right zip code and county is set both on your client profile and in the marketplace is critical to determine the correct APTC and plan availability.
Yeah, and the other thing too is if they don't match up, you could, when it comes back to MyLourie, that's still going to generate an error, right? If something is not correct on MyLourie, that from the marketplace and the information that's put in MyLourie, is that correct?
That's correct, although there's less chance of that happening now that we're running the quote after the client has attested their tobacco statuses and all of that. So there's a lot less of the chance of that happening, but you always want to make sure your client profile in MyLourie and the marketplace are in sync. Okay,
so just a quick question, because some people that have been doing this for a while have been using the quick quote function on there, as opposed to creating a new client under quote and enroll and then checking that box that says add a new client. If you do a quick quote function, what would that be used for now? Are we still using, would you still recommend using that, or would it just be just use quote and enroll only?
So I would recommend using the quick quote for when you're kind of working with a prospect who's not necessarily a client and you're not looking to enroll them immediately. You can go through the quick quote process, the old school quick quote process, where you run the quick quote, pick a plan, go to the marketplace, come back, do your tobacco attestation, and then confirm your plan selection. And the reason you have to confirm your plan selection again is that your estimated subsidy from the quick quote and your real subsidy from the marketplace could be different. They're usually very close, but we don't ask every question that they ask for a quick quote.
I completely understand. And so I've got one question, and then I'll get to a couple of the questions that are asked here. At what point, when you do a quick quote, does it add the client? One great feature is it'll automatically add that client into your client database. At what point does that happen? Is that when you go to the marketplace, or is that when you come back from the marketplace and do the attestation?
It will be after you come back from the marketplace. So as soon as you return to MyLourie, it will be creating your client profile.
Perfect. All right. Brenda, you had a question about tax credits. Will they change much from 2021, or are they the same? Any change? Yes, they change every year, which is why it's important to redetermine that, because premiums change, new carriers enter the market. There's new, the tax credits are all based on what is called the benchmark plan for that particular client in that particular area, right? Which is the second lowest costing silver plan. So if a new carrier comes in, with a lower price silver plan, or the prices of all the silver plans go up, the tax credits are going to change. And then again, it's really important too to redetermine that eligibility, because people's incomes change. Maybe slightly, maybe a lot. They may have been on unemployment this year. They're not going to be on unemployment next year. So maybe, so it's really important to re-ask those questions and re-qualify them. If it's your client, if it's not your client, it's a way to gain a client. So absolutely. Good questions. Cynthia Bradley, thank you. I have a client that is on disability paying COBRA now till, I'm assuming you're saying Medicare eligible. Can you enroll him with an effective date of an 11/1 or 1/1 date? Yes, you can enroll him. Well, hold on. No, you cannot just voluntarily drop COBRA outside of the open enrollment period. It would have to expire, or you have to have another qualifying life event. You can't just say, I don't want COBRA anymore, I want to go in the marketplace. But you could certainly do it for a 1/1 effective date, Cynthia. So I hope that answers your question. All right. Well, Trip, let's see here. I think, was there anything else that, okay, someone had a question about yep, somebody had a question. All right. As far as the permission to contact goes, there was an email. If the client doesn't want to give an email address, is there another way to do that? Is there a verbal authorization? How does that work? And I know we've got Kathy also on the webinar here. I don't know if you're available, Kathy. I just,
I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning, Kathy. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you. So obviously, as Chip was going through that workflow, you could see that there was a consent requirement, that the agent was attesting that they had the customer's consent before accessing their application within healthcare.gov or moving forward with an application for them. So this year, as you guys have gone through your FFM certification training, you know that the CMS had a little bit more emphasis on obtaining consent and actually retaining documentation of that consent. So it's important, however you're going to do this, is, just to ensure that you have that consent. If there's a consumer complaint after the fact, or CMS asks you for a record of that consent, that you have some way of tracking that. So within MyLourie, and we'll be providing to David a link where together we've created kind of a standard format for what the consumer is consenting to. So in a text format, you could send your client a text on their phone, giving them that link. They could then read the consent and then reply to your text, agreeing to the consent form. I think it's important that you put the client's name within your text dialogue when you send them that link, and that their reply clearly indicate that they're agreeing to the consent contact form that you've provided them with. Then what you would do is, you would have to maintain a record of that. So whether that's taking a photo of that text dialogue and putting it in a file, or printing that out in some way so that you have a record for your client, I think that's the most important part. So if they don't want to give you an email, text is a great option. And the way that we worked with David and the Laurie organization to create that via a link makes it very easy for them to just link to that and view it and then consent back without having to type out a long text message.
Thank you very much.
So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, that did. And so the other thing to mention too is, in each client's profile, there's a section for, you can upload a file and add what's called an activity. And a good place to store that would be in the client's profile under the activity section. So if you can still see Trip's screen here, right there, where you could just say, you could name it consent to, marketplace consent or ACA consent, and then, just upload the file right there. It's stored in MyLourie, so whenever you go to that client's profile, you'll have it right there at your fingertips, and you can just view it. So very, very good to have, that. Thank you guys so much. Thank you. All right. So that pretty much explains everything there. Trip and Kathy, we very, very much appreciate you guys being on the webinar and going through the workflow. This is a recorded webinar as well. So for those people that want to slow down Trip's lightning speed, process through there, it's great for new agents. Experienced agents obviously can move through it just as quick as well. Cynthia, you said, is there a general form that we can use where we can input client-specific information? You're talking about for the consent, Cynthia, is that correct? I believe Kathy mentioned that it gives you permission, for that client, as long as it's a unique link for that client, correct?
Yes, there's a unique link. So if you're not face-to-face with the client, that text message and the link there is a great option. But if you are face-to-face with your client, David, again, we created, we shared that document where it's the same language that you can print out on a piece of paper. It's in a Word document format, so you can simply insert your client name. You can insert your name as the agent, or if you're actually, an agency, you can use your agency name. And then the client simply will sign and date that. So then again, if you're face-to-face, you can use a paper format. And David, you have that format, so I think you can share that with your team.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. We'll send that out to everybody who registered for the webinar. So you'll get it in Word or PDF format. So thanks again, Kathy, for being there, and Trip, for both of you guys for implementing that. It's not the same as a scope of appointment. You don't have to do that. For those that do Medicare as well, it's not something you have to do every single time you're with a client. It's just a one-time authorization, and you just retain it in their file. So. Thank you guys again. All right. So with that, before we move over to the next phase, if there are any other questions, please type them in. Everybody's been great with those. And then we'll kind of go over data mismatches. Brenda, you mentioned that, and that's a big deal. Not necessarily today, but about 90 days from today. Or whenever you're doing the application. So thanks, guys. All right. Well, that wraps that. It doesn't look like we have any further questions. So with that in mind, I'm going to reshare. I'm going to try and share my screen now. Let's just see here. Give me 1 second, and then we'll just talk about data mismatches. Hold on 1 second. Perfect. Hopefully everybody can see that. This is Chris's enrollment portal. Obviously, he does a ton of enrollments. You can clearly see that on the left. But we're here to help you do those enrollments. So, David, when will this feature be turned on? It doesn't work like that in my portal right now. Correct. That'll be turned on in a couple days on the first. You'll see that beginning on the first NIC. And it's very easy to do. I wouldn't, it's a quick process, and it just gives you permission, for the future to, look up that client's information. So it's a CYA essentially, right? So it's good to have that process in place. So Brenda, you asked what documentation and how do you send additional documentation? So we have an ACA 101 webinar that we discussed this on, that Chris did a few days ago. And as what you'll see is when you're submitting some applications, if something is inconsistent, if data is inconsistent from what the marketplace uses and what they'll check with the IRS and some other places too. And if there's something inconsistent, it'll populate when you submit the application. It'll say, hey, this person may be eligible for a tax credit, but in red text on the right-hand side, it says this eligibility is temporary, and it says you have to send something in. You always want to click on the button that says View Eligibility Notice because it will give you further details. So, for instance, let's say Joe Greenville and Jane Greenville said their income is $25,000, but the IRS, when they filed their taxes earlier this year, it's going to show that their income was $75,000. It's going to ask them, hey, wait a second, that's not right. Tell us how you're only getting $25,000. And so it's going to tell you, the client's going to have to supply the information to you or the marketplace. They can send it directly to the marketplace. I don't recommend that. I recommend them sending it to you, and you can go in their portal and upload it. You'll have to, if it's income related, you'll have to upload, either pay stubs or some form of, it tells you 1099s, you'll see. And if you have further information, feel free to call us. But it's real important that you get that information from the client as soon as possible. At least, you have to have it uploaded before the deadline because if they don't verify it, they are at risk for losing their entire subsidy. So if it's a husband and wife that's in their 50s and their premium may be $200 after a tax credit or subsidy, their premium could go up to $2,000, if they don't verify that information. And if you're highly subsidized, there's a really good chance it's going to be tough to pay an unsubsidized premium to get that back in. So that's why you stress it. The big thing you can do too in your portal is back where it says activities. I don't know if I can use Chris's because there may be some information on there, but if we want to add a new client here, let me just see this real quick. 1 second. But if you want to add a new client, there's a little section in there that says activities. So let's just see here real quick. I'm going to just add a test client in there. And Tripp kind of alluded to it earlier. The reason you want to have this information on there is you can set little mismatch dates and create tasks for yourself. This will be live by the end of the day today. Whoops. Okay. All right. So when you have the client's information saved in your portal, down at the bottom, you'll see something that says activity history and notes. You can create an activity and upload a file. We were just talking about adding the consent on there earlier. There's a neat little feature here where you can create an activity and you can say client data mismatch due. And you can create a type. You can say, hey, I need to call this person, right? Leave some notes on there, put a follow up, and then put the due date. So let's say it's due, you do your enrollment November the 1st, it's going to give you 90 days. So November, December, let's just say the end of January, 2022, you would put that date in there. And now you've got an activity right here. And on your due date, you will see your tasks change to reflect that. I've got a question, Tripp. I don't know if you're still on, but will MyLourie show you upcoming tasks before they are due? Is there that feature built in, or will it only show you on the due date? All right. So I don't know that he's if his mic is muted, but so again, it's really important you have this information here to keep track of it. It's a tool just to have it. Most of your clients won't need it if all of the information is plugged in correctly. And there's a nice little ambulance going by or fire truck going by. But you can, it's important to keep track of this stuff so that your clients aren't losing any tax credits they're eligible for. It's important to know, let your clients know they need to send this information in as well. And we're going to have an entire webinar at the beginning of the year on how to go over data mismatches a little bit more in depth, and also how to report a life change and common types of life changes that are reported. So one other key feature I want to point out, guys, before we adjourn here is in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see there's a chat feature. This chat feature will be live beginning the 1st of November. It will run from 8 to 6 Eastern time, Monday through Friday. And if you've got some common questions, you're getting stumped, you've got an error message of some sort, if you can always call us here at Lurie Life and Health, and you can also utilize this chat feature to ask your questions. It will be staffed from 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. All right, what other questions do we have? Well, looks like we don't have any more questions. And for that, we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Trip. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. We really appreciate it. This was an exercise on how to quote and enroll for an ACA. Thank you. The OEP begins on Monday of next week. I can't believe it's already here. It feels like we just had an enrollment season. Just to remind people, it's a little expanded this year. You've got until December 15th to get in for a 1/1 start date, but the enrollment season actually runs until January 15th. For those people that either miss it or need to change something after December 15th deadline. If you have any questions, please give us a call. Lurie Life and Health. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great day.